Hello, my name is David with Northwest Outdoor Adventures, and we're doing something a little bit different today, and hopefully for the future. So, like I said, I am David. This is my girlfriend.
I'm Courtney.
And we came up with an idea to kind of do a little recap, kind of a podcast type thing here, where after we run a race, kind of just like a verbal race report, and just talk about, things that worked, that didn't, how the race went, kind of review the race itself, and just tell stories of the race. So this is the first episode of that show, and the first race we're talking about is the Backcountry Rise 50K. That takes place here in Washington, down by Mount St. Helens. Let's just jump right in. For those that don't know, I've been running races for several years now. I've done a handful of ultras, a bunch of marathons, half marathons. And so, I probably should have started this a long time ago before I started doing all this. Would have made for a lot more content. But here we are. So the course we're talking about today, like I mentioned, is the Backcountry Rise 50K. And it is a pretty gnarly course. Like I mentioned, it takes place in Mount St. Helens. 31 miles-ish, 31.5 or something like that. And it's got just about 8,000 feet of climbing throughout the course of it. So it's a toughie.
It was definitely tough.
It is a toughie, especially for your first ultra, which is what Courtney did.
Probably not the best idea, but it happened.
So for the listeners, what was the reasoning behind picking this as your first ultra?
I didn't have any idea what I was doing in the beginning. I just signed up for something that I thought I was going to be able to do and that I was familiar with, and Mount St. Helens was something I was familiar with. So that was a course I chose, and it was definitely something that was incredibly hard.
So, you say familiar with it, and in reality, that mostly just came from pacing me at the Bigfoot 100K.
I was not familiar with it.
Yeah.
Everything I ran was new. I hadn't ran pretty much any of that before, so I wasn't necessarily familiar with it. But it was something somewhat close, and it was really pretty. So I thought it would be something somewhat easy until I started to run a bit more, and the training for it was really hard. So I knew the race was going to be incredibly hard.
Yeah, so we did go out there, and we'll get into it more here in a bit. But we live pretty close to this, so just some background. I already kind of mentioned my running history and stuff, and both of us have lived together in Olympia for quite a while now. And so, Mount St. Helens is like a 2-hour drive for us if we're going to this side of it.
Well, and I should probably say that I've been running quite a bit too. I've been running for probably the past 2 years. I started with a half marathon, Capital City Half, in 2016.
Quite a bit, in quotes.
And then after that was probably a month or so after I did the Chuckanut Half. And that's kind of when I started to run trails or get familiar with trails. And then from there, I just did a couple of 10Ks and halves on the trails, and probably took 7 or so months off, and then started to get back into it and just jumped into an ultra. So that's kind of what I did.
So skipped right ahead, never did a marathon, just went straight to the ultra distance. What was the longest race before this one?
15.5, I believe. A 25K, yeah.
And where was that? You did Grey Rock?
Yes.
Did Grey Rock and Mary's Peak?
Yes.
All right. So, Pacific Northwesterners probably know those races.
We did do a timed hour, 12-hour timed race, too, which I got my first ultra in. That was probably about a month or so before my actual ultra. So
we'll talk more about that here in a bit. So I do have some structured questions and stuff that I was going to ask throughout this that Courtney has had limited knowledge of, so hopefully these answers are realistic and well thought out. So let's just jump right into it. I already mentioned the race and kind of the overview of it, and these are somewhat technical trails. I mean, there's sections in there that are
runnable.
Yeah, there's definitely runnable sections in there, but there's some sections that are pretty technical, and you're probably not going to be running them unless you're the elitist of the elite runner.
A lot of rocks.
Yeah, there are a lot of rocks, a lot of ash, very slippery area in some places. So, anyways, enough about the actual race. Let's talk about leading up to the race and what it took to get you through your first ultra. Um, so, just generic training going in. What did you follow a plan? Mileage wise, what were you doing? Let's jump like a couple months out from training or from the actual race.
So I set up a plan in February because I was definitely dedicated.
So you signed up at the beginning
February.
of the year.
Yes.
This race took place in September, so you had 8-9 months to prepare.
Yeah, I definitely had enough time. So I set up a plan for myself, just like a marathon, kind of a road type plan, but I knew I was going to be running trails, so kind of just sticking to that distance. And I probably stuck to about 3 weeks of that, and then I didn't look at that again. So I kind of just did my own thing for probably 6-ish months, and I didn't really get in the mileage I probably should have, or the time on the trails I probably should have. I definitely was undertrained.
As is customary.
Yes. So, but yeah, for probably the last 4-ish miles, the last 4 months, I was getting in about 30 miles per week. So that was.
And that's not too bad. I mean, realistically, that's could have definitely been worse. I was probably more undertrained when I did my first ultra, although it was definitely a bit easier than the Backcountry Rise.
And that was just trails around the house. Nothing too crazy. We would go to Mount St. Helens probably like once every 2 weeks or so and try to do a bit of the course or just random trails that we could get in. But yeah, everything was pretty close to the house that I was running.
So, did you have any gear or anything like that? Or is there any specific things that you did during training that you can point to that you were really stoked on and that you thought really did well for you?
For my gear, I was pretty worried about my gear the whole time. I had switched between a couple of vests because I wasn't really sure which vest worked for me. I ended up sticking with the Solomon. Which one was it?
Oh, it's not the most recent
It's a
S-Skin,
men's
but
vest,
well, they're unisex.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's the last generation of the popular Solomon S-Lab vests.
But that seemed to work for me
Skin.
really well. That was the one I actually used for the race and for majority of my training. And then I chafed a lot throughout all of my training. I couldn't find any sports bra that seemed to work for me. Every bra I got, I chafed on my back. I chafed underneath my boobs. Nothing worked for me. I was chafing a lot on my thighs. So leading up to the race, I was actually really worried about what I was going to do for my gear because everything I was using besides my shoes didn't work. So I ended up going with a Patagonia shirt that actually I'd been wearing quite a bit for my training runs, but I don't remember the bra I used, probably like a New Balance bra that I had just bought. And actually I didn't chafe at all, so that was great. And then the pants were just a North Face pair of pants that I had just bought as well. But my shoes were the biggest thing. I loved my shoes. The Hoka's, which ones are they?
The Challenger ATR 4s?
Yeah. They
Hoka One or 1-1?
The best shoes I've ever had. That was my second pair actually that I had gotten, and I love them. I haven't had any blisters, haven't had any problems. They are great for my feet, so.
And you have some pretty gross feet too.
I do.
No
I
offense.
have bunions. I have somewhat gnarly arches, and I also have a really bad wart on my foot. So
yeah, plantar's wart or whatever.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess to bring it back, if somebody who'd never ran anything more than like a half marathon, say, came to you and was like, what should I be doing in training? Do you think? Do you have any, suggestions for them or anything, or?
Oh man, I don't know.
Don't do what I did, or what?
Yeah, I'd say everybody's different. But yeah, for sure, try to get in as much running as you can. That's
get that volume.
Definitely not something that I did. I would say I got in a decent amount of running, but I could have for sure got in a lot more elevation. That was my weakest point for the whole race, was the elevation. Anytime I seemed to hit elevation, it was really hard for me to continue without stopping, or continue at a, I guess, steady pace without feeling fatigued.
Yeah, and I mean, so most races really, your 8,000 feet of climbing in a 50K is pretty gnarly. I mean, that's kind of hard to find in our area, at least. I mean, you get to that 6,000 foot of climbing range, and I mean, that's starting to get pretty hard. So yeah, the 8,000 feet is pretty intense, especially for your first ultra. So I think most people are going to struggle with that, and I'm sure a lot of people did struggle with that during the race. But we'll get into the race here in a second. Now, going along with that, like I've said multiple times here, probably too many times, the race is definitely challenging, and it's a big but, they give you a lot of time to do it.
Yeah, I definitely had enough time. I walked a lot. I could have ran more looking back now. I should have ran more. But
I think in hindsight, everyone thinks that after they've ran the race, they look back and are like, oh, I could have ran that section better. I could have bombed that downhill. But anyways, yeah, so you have 11 hours to do 31 miles with 8,000 feet of climbing. So did that play into the reasoning why you chose this as your first 50K? Because you knew you could power hike the majority of it if you had to?
Yeah. Yeah, the timing was, I mean, I was worried about it. I wasn't worried about it in the beginning when I signed up. But after knowing how much elevation there was, I started to get worried about it. But I realized I would more than likely be able to do it just because there was quite a bit of time.
All right. So moving along here, kind of wrapping up the training and stuff. Did you taper much? How did that work out? And nutrition-wise, did you actually plan anything out going into the race, or how did that work?
I did taper, but not on purpose. Once, going back a little bit, we did the 12-hour timed run about a month before my ultra, and I think that really affected my running afterwards. I took off a week, and then after that, I didn't get back up to 30 miles until the week of the race, which probably wasn't the smartest idea. So I tapered for about 2.5 weeks, and then I believe the last week I ran about 30 miles and then did the race. And what was the other question?
Nutrition. What were you trying to eat? Did you have a plan? Did you have like a calorie per hour thing or anything going on?
My nutrition, I just thought I brought the Spring Energy,
God bless
which
Spring.
which I was using pretty much throughout all my training. Anything over a 13-mile run, I was using the Spring Energies. And then I hadn't actually used any Tailwind in any of my training runs, but I had used it before in a couple of my longer races, so I knew that it fit with my body well, but I wasn't completely sure about how I would do with an ultra. So that was something I used the day of the race that I hadn't used at all in training, and it worked out well for me. But
always a good plan.
Not a good
Try
plan.
new things on race day.
Not a good plan. But it did work out well for me. Other than the fact that a couple of the aid stations were hike-in only, and so by the time I got there, they were pretty much just water. So I didn't have a lot of electrolytes that I thought I would get, but yeah, I did.
All
I
right,
used Tailwind.
so you had a plan going in that you didn't really train with too well.
Really, I didn't have much.
You kind of tapered.
I pretty much was winging everything I did.
All right, so you put in as little effort as possible
Seems
to try to
that
complete.
way, yes.
Okay, let's talk actual race, or at least right before the race. So the night before / morning of, what exactly did you do? I mean, I mentioned that we live close, so I mean, obviously I already know because I was there, but yeah, tell that.
I was extremely nervous the night before. I thought I was going to go to bed really early. I thought I was going to do all these things. Everything was going to be great. I packed my stuff about 2 days before the race, so I was ready in that sense, but I was so nervous about this race. I couldn't sleep. I felt sick for like a week beforehand. So the night before, I told myself I was going to go to bed really early. I didn't go to bed early. I didn't go to bed till probably midnight, and we had to get up at 4. So I hardly slept at all, but
So we woke up just before 4 a.m. to drive about 2 hours down there, and luckily the race started at 7, so we had some time. So it could have been worse, I suppose.
Yeah, it was, I guess, as good as it could have gone. I felt well rested, really, when I woke up. I thought I was going to end up sleeping in the car, and that didn't happen. I just stayed up the whole time, and then the race started. Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about the race. I mean, the morning of, obviously, you're feeling anxious and nervous and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then the gun goes off, so to say. And you're off and running. I mean, did you settle down early and feel like, all right, I just got to grind this out, or was it?
I don't think I think I was going a lot faster than I anticipated going, because I had ran the first 5 or so miles, probably.
Well, so let's take a step back and let's just do this section by section. So the first part of the race, we'll break it up into aid stations.
Yeah.
So the start of the race to aid station 1, which is about 5 miles, and it's relatively flat. You have like 300 miles of climbing throughout that 5 miles. But for this race, that's a relatively flat section.
Yeah.
So, and it has a big downhill right off the start. So how did that go? Was that?
So I had done probably 3 miles of that. So the downhill I hadn't ran yet, but I was already so anxious to start the race. So I was running that faster than I probably should have, but I was just going with the crowd. I was pretty close to the end of the crowd, but I was just following the crowd, going about that pace. It ended up being about a 12-minute per mile pace, which for me is pretty quick. But that's, I think, what I needed to be at in order to kind of get my feet on the ground. So I got probably about 2.5 miles in, and I think that's where I started to settle down a bit. The nerves were kind of gone. I didn't really feel sick to my stomach anymore. I felt comfortable. I started to get in the groove, and I think that's when. And then the aid station was just a little before 5 miles, so 4.7 miles. And I had I had drank my Tailwind, which was 200 calories, and I had one Spring Energy during that. And that was 90 calories. So 290 calories in 5 miles. And then I was cruising. I felt really good for that section.
And so you said you didn't really have a plan, but nutrition-wise, you were trying to get in, what, like 100 to 200 calories an hour or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I brought 8 Spring Energies, and my goal was just to eat all of those throughout the race, which I knew was roughly what I needed. And then I also my goal was to fill up Tailwind 3 times, so 600 calories in Tailwind.
And so for those that don't know, Spring Energy is just a company, and they make these kind of fruit puree type
almost
things.
Like baby food.
Yeah, they're very much like baby food. I think they're marketed as gels, but they are, at least to me, they're a lot better tasting than gels, and they're a lot easier to eat. They don't have that kind of...
Settle better on your stomach, too.
Yeah, they don't have that weird consistency that gels have. Not that this is an ad for Spring Energy, because I think most of their flavors are disgusting. But the plum kind is really good.
Yeah,
so,
I used to like the strawberry
like
kind, but the plum is definitely, when I'm running a longer distance, that's definitely something that settles better in my stomach.
Yeah, the plum is probably the only kind I would eat. But if you're interested, I mean, check it out. And then Tailwind, I assume everyone knows, but that's pretty much just like electrolyte mix that you pour into water.
And I was drinking the green tea kind.
Gross.
Which is good.
So, there we go. We're through the first section. You're feeling great, looking good, having a good time. And so, at this point, it's probably still early in the morning, 8:30, something like that. And then, so this is where the race starts to get real. And so it's important to note too that, there's only 3 aid stations in this 50K.
There was only 3 aid stations, which there was supposed to be 4, but for some reason they had taken one out about halfway through signing up for the race. So that scared me a bit.
Yeah, and the only real aid station is the last one. So anyways, at this second aid station, you're going from the first to the second in this next stretch, and this next stretch is a real doozy.
8 miles.
You're 8 miles with, what, like 3,000 feet of climbing here?
Possibly a little more, but I think that's...
Yeah, about 3,000 feet of climbing, maybe a little more. And so that's from the cold water aid station out to Grizzly Lake. And so I assume this is where stuff starts to get real.
Actually, this part, I felt okay. This 8 miles, the only part that was bad, I got to about mile 6.5 and I got stung by a bee. And at that point, things mentally started going weird. I still felt good, but I kept telling myself...
6.5 of
miles.
this 8 section, or 6.5 total?
Total. 6.5 miles total.
Okay, so you basically just got past that first aid station.
Yeah, it was about 1.5 miles in, yeah. And I had gotten stung by a bee. And at first I was confused. I didn't really know what it was. And then I realized it was a bee sting. And so
Not allergic?
No.
As far as you know?
Nothing happened. So, but I did tell myself that things were happening. My legs, they were hurting the whole time. So that I just kept telling myself that it was because of the bee sting that my legs were hurting, or I would feel somewhat dizzy and I would tell myself it was because of the bee sting that I was feeling this way, which wasn't the case at all. But my brain was doing weird things. So that started to scare me a bit. But other than like the running, everything was going good. I was still on pace. I think my pace was probably like 15 minutes per mile up until that aid station, I believe. Maybe a little, like maybe 16 minutes per mile. But for me, that's pretty good, especially with the climb. I'm not very good at climbing. And that whole time I pushed it through. I was moving pretty quickly and I felt good. So all the way up until that aid station, that second aid station at 13 miles, I felt great. That's when things started to turn, was just a little after that second aid station.
So you get to this 13 aid station, which is almost halfway. I mean, it's a little bit before the halfway mark.
And I felt really good because I thought, oh, I already am pretty much halfway. Like, I got this in the bag, no problem, because I felt so good.
So the next stretch, which is the longest stretch in between aid, is
11.5.
Yeah, it's aid 2 to aid 3, which is Grizzly Lake to Johnston Ridge Observatory. And Johnston Ridge Observatory is where you actually get to see crew for the first and only time, which is where I was waiting. And it's also important to note, you pretty much don't really have cell service for the most part along the majority of this race. I mean, there's certain spots where you'll get it, but Johnston Ridge is almost the only place in that whole area that you get cell reception, at least for most carriers. So, a lot of people are anxiously waiting there for their runners to see what's going on. And so, yeah, this next section, which again has about 3,000 feet of climbing, a little bit more. I think it's probably more like 3,600 feet of climbing over that 11.5 miles. So at least it's a bit more spread out. But the terrain is rugged and it's definitely out in the backcountry. So how did that go?
I would say this 11.5 miles was the absolute worst part of the whole race. I mentally was not there, physically was not there, wanted to drop every single second. As soon as I left that aid station, I asked them if they had any tailwind or any Coke or anything. They basically just had water, and it was a cupless race, so they had a little bit of Coke, but I didn't really care at the time I didn't have a cup, and so I didn't really care to waste my time to try to get some Coke in my bladder or my flask. So I filled up everything with water. I had one orange slice, and my nutrition was still good besides drinking. I hadn't had any electrolytes or salt, and they did have salt capsules there, which they offered to me. But at the time, I wasn't cramping, and I had never done salt before, so I wasn't 100% sure if that's something I should do, because they say don't try new things on a race day, which I was already trying the tailwind. So I didn't want to mix too many things up, so I didn't do the salt, which in hindsight, I definitely should have. And so I left that aid station with just one slice of orange and water. And when I was just about to leave the aid station, I asked the guys at the aid station, tell me honestly, was the 8 miles I just did harder, or is this 11.5 miles harder? And they said the 8 miles was incredibly harder and that I had it in the bag. Not sure if they were just saying this, but that was not the case for me at all. So...
Never trust the aid station volunteers.
Yeah, it was awful. I haven't ever experienced anything like this, and probably just because I haven't done this far of a race where mentally it got to me, but probably the first mile after that aid station, for about 2.5 miles, it was all uphill, or possibly 2 miles all uphill. And I had already climbed quite a bit, so my legs were pretty much jello. The first mile, I felt pretty good. And then after that mile, my legs just started cramping terribly bad. And I've never experienced that. So it was awful. I didn't know whether to walk, whether to run, jog. Anything I did hurt so bad, I just wanted to stop. So I think...
And so, yeah, at this point, this is probably about the time that I got a text.
I was going to say,
it's like one of the first texts
point,
I actually received through the day. So I'm sitting in my truck at Johnston Ridge, just laying in the back of my cab, just with my phone next to me, just kind of waiting. And then I get a text come in from Courtney, and I'm like, oh no. Like, I hope she's just, saying that she's on her way and she's, at mile whatever. And I think the first thing she said was like...
I got stung by a bee.
Yeah, I got stung by a bee, not doing good, trying to go forward or something.
Well, and then right after that, I said, I think I'm going to go back to that aid station I just came from because I can't do this.
Yeah, then the thoughts of quitting came in. And,
yes.
And so I see that and I'm like, oh no, because that aid station is a hike-in aid station, which means, no matter what you do, you're going to have to hike out.
Well, and to me, my brain wasn't thinking that. To me, my brain was thinking, I've got 9 miles to get to him or 2 miles to get back to that aid station. So I could just go 2 miles back to that aid station and be done. That's what I was thinking. So I walked for quite a bit. I was moping for quite a bit. And then I think probably a mile after that, I told myself, all right, you can do this. I started to feel a little better. And so probably for about 2 miles, I did a slow jog, probably walked quite a bit. Any incline, I wasn't running at all. I was completely power hiking or walking slowly.
And let it be known, I made it very clear she should not turn around and she should power forward in a very positive manner. I told her that.
No, he was great the whole time. He kept me positive the whole time. I definitely wasn't positive. I was having a lot of mental problems, which I hadn't ever experienced. But my legs just hurt so bad the whole time that I just kept telling myself, like, you can stop any minute. Like, you don't have to do this. So I had convinced myself this whole time that I was running or walking or whatever I was doing, that I was going to stop at the next aid station, that no matter what, no matter how much time I had left or how much time I didn't have left before I got cut off, I was done. I wasn't going to go any further. I didn't care. And I knew, actually, backing up a bit, my family and all my friends were at the finish waiting for me. And so when David was saying there was no cell service, that was kind of a problem for all of them because they had gotten there pretty early and they had no idea what was going on. And so I didn't really care about them at all. I was just ready to be done. So that whole section, gosh, probably took me 4 hours, probably more than that, maybe 5 hours. It was very daunting. And I made it to David to mile 25 with 10 minutes.
Time, I'm getting texts where I think I probably got maybe 2 more texts. And both were pretty much just like, I'm done. Like, when I come in, I'm dropping. Like, I'm out of here. And so I'm waiting there, and the cutoff at Johnston Ridge was 4 p.m. And not only was that kind of, I guess, the 4 p.m. cutoff was kind of whatever, but the problem with that is if you were to make it in at 4 p.m.,
it was going to be incredibly hard to finish.
Yeah, you only had 2 hours to finish the last, 7 miles.
Which seems like a lot of time, but there was a lot of elevation for that as well.
Well, yeah, the problem is going in, you have to have a positive split at the end there if you're going to make it, if you only have 2 hours. So, that worried me when, 3:30 rolls around and she's not in, and then 3:45 rolls around and she's not in. And I'm like, well, even if she does come in, it's not looking good that she'll finish, because if she's having this bad of a day out there, she's probably not going to kick it into another gear and be able to actually move quickly for these last 7-ish miles.
And that was my thought the whole time.
And so, I'm worried the whole time and waiting for her to come in. And, I'm seeing people come in and they're not looking good. And, it was getting to the point where I think I pretty much told myself, I'm like, well, if she's not the next person in, she's probably just like she's going to get cut off and that'll be it. And so I'm trying to mentally prepare, as a support person there for her. I'm trying to prepare in my head, what I'm gonna have to tell her to console her and like, explain to her why it's okay and all that stuff. And then as I'm like going through those mental hoops in my head, then she comes rolling out of the trail and running actually on the sidewalk out towards that aid station and just shaking her head and, putting her hand across her neck saying she's like done, she's out. And I think that's when the tears started rolling too.
Yeah, and stepping back a little bit too, I did meet someone on the trail, Samuel, and he actually helped me. We ran together for probably 5-ish miles, and he had some caffeinated chews, which, like I said, I needed salt, and I didn't have it, so I was just drinking water. And I don't normally like chews, but the caffeine in those, for some reason, I only had about 4 of them. But I think that's at the end what seemed to help me push through. I had about 4, and in about an hour or so, because like I said, we were running together for about 5-ish miles. And when I say running, we weren't running. We were walking very pathetically, both of us complaining about things and wanting to be done, walking as slow as we could. And I was telling myself, you need to move, but my body wouldn't move. Or it wouldn't move the pace I wanted it to move. And so after a while, I realized you're not going to make it if you keep going this slow. You need to go. You need to leave this guy, because it was comfortable for me to be with somebody. So I told myself I was going to run. And I think I had about 2 miles left, or 2.5 miles until that aid station. And I just told Samuel, I got to go. I got to pick it up. I got to keep moving. And that's when I started to actually really feel good. But I still told myself in my head, 100% you're giving up. It doesn't matter what happens at this aid station. This next aid station, you're done. Like, your body's taken enough beating. You don't need to do this anymore. You're done. And that's when I saw David. And as soon as I saw him, I just lost it. I started crying. I wanted to be done. I didn't want to do it anymore. And I only had 10 minutes before I was going to be cut off to continue. So I was done. I don't know what made me continue, but at that point, rolling in, everything hurt, and I was just done.
Yeah, well, she rolled in, and, I tried to get her what she might want, so we had some soda and stuff, and I refilled her water bottles, got her tailwind going again, and I was really just trying to push her back out there as quick as can be. And, just try to keep a positive attitude, even though inside my head, I'm like, well, this is not good.
And I was not positive. I was definitely negative.
Yeah, she was a little rude to the aid station volunteers and a little rude to me. But that's to be expected, towards the end of an ultra there. And to be fair, the aid station volunteers weren't super helpful. They were basically just telling her to quit. They were telling me
to just quit. And I think that's actually what got me back out was David was being so helpful. As soon as I rolled in, I just had a negative attitude. I just knew I was done. It didn't matter what anybody said to me. It didn't matter how hard David tried to push me. I was done. And I was sad. Like, I just wasn't happy at all. It wasn't fun for me. I was just in a really bad spot. My legs hurt really bad, and I really wanted something to drink, anything to drink besides water. And right when I rolled in, I think they told me to sit down, and that was like, for some reason, it made me really angry. So everything after that, just, I don't know. But I drank Tailwind, Gatorade, Mountain Dew. I had 2 salt pills, 5-hour energy. And I think that's it. And I had all of that in the course of probably like 4 minutes or so. Because like I said, I only had 10 minutes to get everything down and leave.
Yeah, and I wanted to get you out before the 10 minutes mark. Because, I mean, like I said, even leaving at 4, you're cutting it really close, like by the second.
Well, and the ladies were like in my face, like, you don't have to do this. You know yourself better than anybody, like, you can just stay here. Like, you can be done. You don't have to do this.
Yeah, which is not something you should probably tell somebody that's at the tail end of an ultra.
And I don't know how bad of I don't know how bad I looked. I mean, looking back on it now, I was crying a lot, and my legs were cramping really bad when one of the guys was trying to help wipe off my bee sting. So maybe that's why, but they were helpful. It just, the way that they were telling me to quit, I think that's what drove me to not want to quit, was just them in my face saying, you know yourself better than anybody. You don't have to do this. And in my head, I was like, nothing on me is physically really hurting besides my legs. And I know that's just cramping. And that's to be expected for running 25 miles with about 6,000 feet of gain or more. So I knew I would be hurting on my legs. Like I knew that was something that would be hurting. But I also knew that if I had to continue, I could. So I think them telling me I couldn't do it was just the push to help me to do it.
And maybe they just knew you better than I did in the reverse psychology. They had it planned out. So we'll never know. But yeah, maybe that was their strategy all along. So that happens. You come in. Things really aren't looking too good at this point. I'm certainly worried. But we get you out. You take some oranges with you. You start walking along. I tell you to take it easy for a little bit and then try and run any downhills you can and really take advantage of any of the terrain you can because, I knew that it was going to be really close. And this last section, so for mile 24 and a half or 25-ish till the finish at mile 31, just under 7 miles, and it's mostly downhill, so it's a little bit deceiving in that you kind of cruise down some nice trails for a few miles, and then you're on some road for almost a mile, like a half mile. And then you're on some flat, and then it's just a steep up until the finish. So there's that last almost whole mile. I think it's like 0.8 miles or something like that, where you're just going straight up. And that can be rough when you're done mentally and physically. You're feeling like you're done already and you just have to push up a hill for a mile.
Leaving that aid station, I was crying so bad because all I could think about was that hill. And I knew how hard it was going to be and also the timing. Like for me, I would have had to run probably 20 minutes per mile or a little faster than that because I'm not good with hills. And I already had ran 25 miles and I knew that my pace wasn't going to be much faster than what it already was. If anything, it'd be slower because I was so tired and just ready to be done. So for me, I didn't think I was capable of doing it, which is the reason I didn't want to go out. That was the reason in my head that I was just like, it doesn't matter anymore. I'm just done because I can't do this finish. If I only have 2 hours, I'm not going to be able to do this. That's what I kept telling myself. And so when you said, you can do this, in my head, I was like, I know I can't do this because I haven't been able to do this before. Like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this now. So that's what scared me the most, was knowing that I only had 2 hours and I still had 7 miles and I knew that hill was there.
And up until then, your pace was a little over 20 minutes a mile.
Yeah.
So, you were going to have to run that positive split at the end there, which, worried me, of course. And, I mean, to be fair, you did get turned around a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Earlier
I forgot.
in the race. So you lost a bit of time there.
Mile 16 or so, there was a junction where I thought I was supposed to go straight because there wasn't any turnoff. There was, but it wasn't very clear. And so I went straight, but I went about a half a mile out and I didn't see anything. I didn't see any ribbons. And so I thought, okay, did I mess up? Did I go the wrong way? So I turned back around and got back to that junction. And I was like, no, this can't be right. So then I turned back around. And it turns out just before I had turned around that half mile, there was a flag. So if I had just gone a little bit more, I'd have seen it. But so I was about a mile off course, which that also ruined my timing and put me...
Well, on course.
Oh, yeah. I didn't go off course. Yeah, I was on course. Yeah, so that was really frustrating when that happened because it was just discouraging to know that I'd wasted time that I didn't have. Because at that point, I knew I was going way slower than I needed to go and that the cutoff was going to be really close for me. So when that happened, and I already knew that in that time in my head, I was done no matter what. So when that happened, that just really pissed me off. And
final nail in the coffin.
It was. It made me really angry. And it made me push actually a little bit harder for about a half a mile. And then it just pissed me off. So... yeah, I did get a little bit off course. So at the end, I was a little over 32 miles instead of the 31 miles.
And you don't want to run into angry Courtney on the trail.
No, yeah, I get really angry, which I really need to fix that. But running can make me happy sometimes and very, very angry. And so,
Highest
Yeah,
highs and lowest lows.
yeah. I definitely, a lot of this race was low. I didn't really feel very happy. It was very, very pretty. And I experienced a lot of that, which made me really happy. But I think just my legs not working was just depressing. And so I just couldn't feel happy. Like, I wanted to run and I knew I needed to run, but I couldn't run. And so it was really frustrating to know that I could be going faster, but I can't go faster. So that was just discouraging because I physically wanted to do it, but I couldn't do it. So,
And all that time, you're just like, why didn't I train more?
I didn't think about that at all, actually.
Like, oh, I'm glad I trained the absolute minimum I needed to.
I blamed it on not having electrolytes or, not
Which,
having salt or, to me, it wasn't
fair,
my
though,
training. To me, it was, oh, you didn't have enough.
that is part of training, learning how your body copes with certain things. But anyways, so we've kind of set ourselves up here for a dramatic finish. We've told the viewers or listeners it's going to be real close. And up until now, nobody knows if you're going to finish or not. So from my side of the story, so I leave the aid station and I'm off to the finish now to see I see Courtney's family. I meet up with them. And so we're all kind of anxiously waiting at the finish there. And in between the finish and that aid station, there's a road crossing where I wait for Courtney to check in to see, how she's doing. And I do see her, although she gets there pretty much right before the time that I would think she needs to get there in order to finish. And actually maybe even a little bit after, given the hill that's coming up. So I see her and I'm positive about it. And I tell her, she's doing great. Keep going. You're almost there. Because at that point, she has only like two and a half miles left. It's about 2.5 miles from that point.
Okay.
A little under 3. And then I go to the finish and I meet up with Courtney's family and everything. And of course, they haven't heard anything pretty much all day, outside of when Courtney got stung by a bee. And so, because there is no cell service at the finish line where they all are. So I tell them kind of what's going on, but I'm like, look, guys, we might have to prepare for a sad finish where she's past the cutoff. And, we still need to congratulate her for doing a good job. I'm putting in all this time and effort into something, and it's, it is what it is. I was like, there's a real possibility that's going to happen because right now, I mean, if I had to project, it's like right at 6 o'clock. So I don't know, what's going to happen. And so we're all there waiting. And, the time's just ticking by. It's like 5:30 p.m. and then 5:35 and then 5:40. And, there's a couple of people coming in that I've seen in front of you the whole time that I had seen at the previous aid station. And so I'm like, trying to gauge their finish off of where you are because, they were like 10 minutes ahead of you or something. So we're like, all right, well, that puts her, maybe at like 5:50 or 5:55 for a finish if she like pushes it. And those times come around and no Courtney. And it's 5:55 and we're all just kind of like, so it's going to be this kind of a end to the day.
So for me, when I left that aid station, David walked with me for a little bit, just until I got to the trail. And at that point, it was pretty much all downhill for me. So I'd say probably about 2 miles of that. It was really nice because I hadn't had a downhill in a while. So he just told me to walk for about a quarter of a mile. And then when I felt comfortable, try to run. So for me, as soon as I got to the trail, I saw that it was downhill. I started running. I ran for about 2.5 miles until my legs started seizing again. And during that time, it hurt for me to walk. It hurt for me to run. So I just took it easy for a while, tried to walk until my legs didn't hurt anymore, which was probably about another quarter mile. And then I started to run again, just started to try to tell myself, no matter how bad your legs hurt, don't stop running, just keep running. And that lasted for probably about 2 more miles until I got to the road. Once I got to the road, I think I ran a majority of the road. Not any of the flats, though. All of the flat I walked because it hurt so bad to run. So I walked the flats, and then once I got to the downhill on the road, I ran all of that, and I just kept telling myself that it was going to be downhill until that big hill, which was not the case at all. For some reason, I didn't remember there being a couple of hills once I got back on the trail, and that really made me mad. So I got on the trail. I had probably about 1.5 miles left, maybe a little bit more than that. And at that point, I was pretty certain I wasn't finishing. I think I probably had about 45 minutes or so left. I could have had a little bit less than that, but about 45 minutes or so to the time I was on the trail until the finish. So about 1.5 miles till the finish. And I hadn't cried at all when I was by myself, only when I saw David, but I was pretty emotional just in my head, just thinking like, what a waste of the day. Like, you're not going to be able to do this. And I was just bummed out. So I would walk fast on any of the uphills and then try to run as fast as I could on any of the downs, which was not very fast at this point, but faster than, what I thought I could be doing. And then once I got to the hill, which was the 0.8 miles before the finish, I looked at my watch one last time just to see how much time I had left and if I really could do this. And I looked down and my watch said about 28 minutes till the finish. And in my head, I was like, you've never been able to go this fast up a hill. You've never been able to go up a hill with this much elevation, which I think it had about, I could be wrong, but it was probably about 500 or 600 feet of elevation, maybe a little more than that. I'm not exactly sure. But it was steep. It was a steep hill for having ran 31 miles already and being incredibly tired and just wanting to be done and emotionally not being there and physically not being there, just chugging along, trying my hardest to push and knowing that I only had less than 30 minutes. And so I got about what I thought was halfway up, and I was anxious. Like I kept looking at my watch, just thinking like, you're not going to be able to do this. You can't do this. And I got about halfway up and my watch said 15 minutes. And at that point, this was like the only time I had yelled out on the trail or said anything, when I was by myself. And I think I yelled out like, "Are you kidding me?" Because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to do it. There was no way I was going to be able to get up this hill and finish it with 15 minutes left. It just wasn't possible. So I pushed as hard as I could, and I was still really emotional, but I had kind of given up, like knowing that I wasn't going to finish. So I just kept pushing my hardest, trying to continue the momentum, and I thought I heard a car. And at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, I might be able to do this. I think I can do this. And that was probably the only time in, maybe like 15, 20 miles that I thought I could do it. Like that I thought I was really going to be able to finish this thing. And that I got positive and just this burst of energy like went through me. And then I thought I saw cement. And at that point, I just pushed it as hard as I could. And I looked down at my watch and it said 3 minutes. And I was like, I might be able to do this. So I pushed as hard as I could. And at that point, I came out to the cement and I saw a bunch of orange cones. My family was all there, but to me, like, that's not what I was looking for. I just couldn't find the finish. I was confused as to where the finish was. So I was scanning like crazy, just trying to figure out which way I needed to go because I knew I didn't have time.
And it is literally 5:59.
Yeah.
At that point, it's 5:59 p.m.
And the cutoff was 6 o'clock. And so I jump out of the bushes, and I'm just frantically scanning anywhere for the finish. And I see it to the left of me, and I just sprint as hard as I can. I don't think I've ever ran faster in my life. I was sprinting so hard, probably for 0.15 miles or something, maybe a little less than that. I don't even know what it was to the finish.
But it was like 200 feet.
Yeah, it was definitely scary thinking I wasn't going to finish. And I finished with 1 minute to spare. So I finished.
Less than a minute, really.
Yeah, I think it was like
30 seconds or something.
No, I think it was like a minute and I think I had like 1 minute and 2 seconds left. Because I don't know. But either way, I finished the race. So yes, so I finished and I looked for David as soon as I finished and I just collapsed in his arms and cried. And I was so happy to be done. I was so happy that I did it. And it was great.
It was great. That was it. The whole thing was great.
No, it was definitely one of the hardest days of my life. And yeah, I did not expect it to be that mentally daunting and to go through so many different emotions of being happy, being sad, being scared that I wasn't going to get the cutoff, adrenaline coming in and out, a bee sting. Just, there's just so many different things that went wrong that I didn't anticipate going wrong. And then I finished.
And then you finished. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was... Because usually it's the other way around where you're waiting on me to finish a race without any information or anything. And this time, yeah, it was me waiting around the whole day and just kind of anxiously waiting there. And I would have to say I'd prefer it to be the other way around because I don't really like feeling like that. And it's really hard when a loved one is going through that, especially when you've been there yourself and you know what they're going through. And, there's really nothing you can do to help them. And a lot of that is like character defining moments where it's like you want them to pull through and be that strong person that they can be. But at the same time, if they don't or they can't, you have to be there to support them and understand, what and why they chose to do what they did, or, why they couldn't physically do it or whatever. So it's interesting on both ends of it, but I would definitely rather be the runner in that situation, I think, moving forward. So hopefully we don't go through that, at least not that close of a finish again, because that was a little bit, I think it took a couple of years off my life. But
I should definitely add, too, that David was a huge help in all of it. I would not have been able to finish without him. Like I said, I was 100% dropping at that last aid station, Johnston Ridge. I was done. And
that's the job of the crew, is to help get. I mean, your crew members should know going in, what your threshold is for dropping, and I feel like I had a pretty decent idea of what it was going to take for you to drop, and so I feel like I held up my end of the bargain there. So yeah, good job, me.
Yeah, you did a great job. I definitely couldn't have done that without you. Because like I said, I was down. I was definitely depressed. So seeing you at that aid station, I was so excited to see you. And I didn't know I could do it, but I knew I could continue the next 7 miles. Physically, I was capable of doing that. So that push was definitely what I needed. And then having my family and everybody there at the end was definitely great. I didn't want them there in the beginning.
Well, and to be fair to your family, they really don't understand what the ultra running community is like or these races are like. So they didn't, they don't really know that you don't see the runner, at least in this particular race. I mean, you really don't get to see him until the end.
Yeah.
And it's like the emotions that come out in ultra races are so much heavier usually than like a half marathon or a marathon or whatever.
Well, which I hadn't experienced before. So I didn't want any of my family there. I only wanted David there because I knew I was going to be angry no matter what happened, because I'm not a happy runner. I knew I was going to be angry, and I just didn't want my family to see me that way. And then if I didn't finish, I would have just beat myself up. Like, I would have been really upset that I had tried and, been out there for so long and that I just couldn't do it. That would have been really depressing for me. And just to have my family there and have to tell them, I couldn't do it. And, you drove all the way out here to see me for 5 seconds, and I didn't finish. So that to me was, I didn't want them there because I slightly was concerned that I wasn't going to finish. So
yeah, and it weighs on your mind throughout the day when you have people kind of not depending on you, but, there to see you do well. And then
yeah,
it kind of puts a weight on your shoulders. So it adds a little bit of stress, which, maybe isn't the best thing for your first ultra. So we could sit here and talk about how great everyone is all day, but we got to wrap this up at some point. And there are some other things I wanted to talk about. So you finished the race.
Yeah.
You're stoked.
I was
Everyone's
definitely
happy. Everyone's thinking you're great. You finished. So you had 11 hours. You finished 10:59. And so I guess the race overall, if you had to rate it, out of 10 or something, just as an overall race, and then as your first race, what would you say?
I thought it was great. I would rate it probably like a 9. It was a good race. It was beautiful. It was hard for sure, but it was so pretty and so worth it.
Well marked?
Yeah, it was well marked. Other than a few junctions weren't marked, but I mean, if you have the knowledge of a trail, you should know just to continue following the trail that you're following. So continue to go straight and you're good. And I am not good at navigating at all. So the fact that I thought I got lost and didn't get lost, I mean, I've gotten lost on trails before. So for me to be able to stick to this trail, then yes, it was well marked. But no, I thought it was great.
Do you think it's a good first ultra?
No, this is definitely, and if you train, yes. So if I had trained a bit more, and if I was getting in like 45 miles a week, or even just getting in 30 miles a week with quite a bit more elevation, then I think I would have been great and I would have been fine. But physically, I wasn't there. I could have put in way more time and I didn't. So definitely not a good first for me. If you were going in knowing that you were going to be doing this much elevation and you actually did follow a plan for 8 months, you would have been fine because there was well over enough time to finish. You would have been just fine.
Yeah, I guess I would say I would not have chose it as my first race, and I wouldn't recommend it for anyone as their first race probably. Mostly not even due to the elevation, which is certainly a challenge, but I think one that can be overcome with training.
It was technical too.
Yeah, I'd say the more challenging part of it, at least for a first-time racer, would probably be just the remoteness that you go through. So you're really out in the backcountry in some of these sections, and if you don't have a decent knowledge of, trail safety, I guess, and just like wilderness survival, it can be kind of dangerous doing that. And not only that, but a bit intimidating as well. So it's something to think about if you're looking at some of these races. And there's pretty large stretches without aid, which is not, for a 50K, it's pretty uncommon to go 11 and a half miles without aid in the backcountry.
And you're by yourself on the trail. There's not really anybody around you on ultras. You're pretty much by yourself majority of the race.
Well, at least for this race where, it's capped at whatever it is, 200 people or something like that. You spread out pretty quick, unless you're just clumped in the middle there. So, yeah,
I would not say don't do this for your first ultra. For sure, do not do. It was very pretty and it was a great race, but do not do this for your first ultra. It's
I think it takes a special kind of person to be able to do this. But anyways, moving along here. So post-race, how did your recovery go? And then, first of all, that recovery. Were you dead the second day or the day after? Did you wake up with horrible muscle soreness? Or
I was definitely sore, but I feel like my recovery was a bit better than I thought I would be. I didn't think I'd be able to walk for like a week. I thought I was going to be down for a long time. I thought you were gonna have to carry me around. The way I felt when I got done, I thought for sure I wasn't walking for like a week. My feet hurt, my hips hurt, my tailbone was really sore. I was definitely really sore the day of, and then that night I think I maybe slept 5 hours, and throughout the whole time sleeping, it was like my legs were trembling, my feet hurt really bad, my body just hurt. And then I woke up and my feet didn't hurt at all. My feet didn't hurt. I didn't have any blisters. And I didn't chafe. I should add, I didn't chafe at all for that whole race, which is definitely great for me because, like I said, every single race or practice run or anything that I had done, I was chafing. So that was great. The squirrel's nut butter really helped. Also not a sponsor. But yes, I couldn't really walk very well that first day, the beginning of the day. And then the end of the day, I was cleaning the house. I was, moving around quite a bit. And it just felt like a tough day at the gym, really. Just my legs were shot and my tailbone hurt really bad. So you were healed through the miracle of sleep. I guess so. So looking back on it, reflecting on it now, which is easy to do, what would you have done differently? Hindsight is 2020. I would have ran more. I wish I would have. I
which is
wish
easy
I
to
just
say.
would have. My brain just kept telling me stop, just stop and walk, or just stop altogether. And I just wish that I would have pushed through that and not stopped, because anytime my brain said stop, or I felt like, you need to just take a break, I would walk. And looking back, I could have ran a lot of that. And the worst that would have happened is my muscles would have cramped up, which they already were doing. So, I should have ran more.
Nutrition, would you have done anything differently with that? Would you bring ass caps on your next ultra, or?
Well, I don't really know, because I felt like my nutrition was pretty good, other than the fact that I didn't have the tailwind, which it was my fault.
Nutrition / hydration. We'll
Yes,
them as the
like
same thing.
it was my fault. I shouldn't have relied on the aid stations, especially when they were hike-in only until mile 25. But I did rely on them, and I thought that for sure that second aid station was going to have the tailwind that I needed, you know?
It was kind of a bummer. I mean, just saying, promising aid and then not delivering it is a little weak. But yeah, a hike-in aid station, you can only expect
Well,
so
and
much.
I shouldn't have expected them to have it. And so I don't exactly know. If I had the tailwind, would I have still cramped? Probably. I couldn't tell you. If I had taken the salt pills, would I still cramp? I don't know.
Well, so you're probably going to run another ultra now, I assume.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure you said the day after that you don't want to do it, or when you finished it, you didn't want to do it.
Probably about a week out, I said I would never do it again. But yeah,
what would you do? What would you want to do differently for the next race?
Be prepared. I say this for every race, but I just go into it with this, headstrong of, I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to be so prepared. I'm going to run every day. And I don't. I do that for maybe like a week, and then I'm like, I don't need to do this. Like, I'll be fine come race day. And then I sort of just wing it. And this wasn't a race that you could kind of just wing it on.
I guess you did.
Well, I did, but I definitely, it was
close.
Cut it close.
Yeah.
And so I think if there's any other race that I decide to do, I would like to be a lot more prepared. Not nutrition. I mean, nutrition, I do feel like I can kind of wing the nutrition until it seems to catch up to me. But physically, I need to be there. Yeah,
I mean, I think it definitely gets a bit difficult, more difficult. Yeah, the further you go. However,
with nutrition,
time is a factor, and being out there for 12 hours is a long time, and so there's some middle ground there that I'm sure you struck. So I'm sure that race prepared you well for a 50 miler, as I'm sure it's probably more difficult than a lot of 50 milers out there. But I guess that's the next question.
I don't think I want. I'm not ready for a 50 miler. I don't think. I think I would like to choose a much easier 50K.
Build some confidence.
Yes, like set my ground on something.
The question was, what's the next race?
Yeah, sorry.
Or next, whatever you're planning to do next.
And I think it would be actually really fun for us to run something, some type of a 50K, or possibly a 50 miler, but we've only run one race together, and that was the Chuckanut half, and I was miserable the whole time, and I was so mean. And it's something, your perception of how it's going to be going in has to be somewhat realistic, I think, for spouses or, partners to run together. You have to have some good ground rules going in, or else it's a recipe for disaster. Something happens when I run and I get angry, and I don't know what happens, but I really need to fix that. And so I would love to do a run where possibly a 50 miler, just because I think I would feel a bit more confident if he was there with me. But I think it'd probably just be a 50K for now, just because I don't know that I could actually do the mileage of a 50 miler. I don't think I'm quite ready there yet.
Well, I would certainly recommend training more.
Oh yeah,
and running
for sure.
A faster 50K.
Yeah. Or maybe getting a couple of 50Ks under my belt before we decide to move.
Yeah, there's no real rush. I mean, definitely in this day and age, I mean, myself included, a lot of people like to jump up in distances really fast. And I mean, I get the appeal, certainly. And like I said, I myself am doing it, so I'm guilty. But I don't really see the need. I mean, if you're comfortable at a 50K or even a half marathon or whatever, I mean, for those of us that are not winning these races and it's just out there, we're out there to have a good time or, to push ourselves, you got to just do it for yourself. And if that's what makes you happy, then follow that path. So.
Well, and now I'm wondering how I'll feel after doing such a hard 50K and then going into another 50K. Will I feel like it's a lot easier or?
Well, I'll tell you right now, I have done multiple 50Ks and I've done some that are hard and some that are not hard. And every time I run it, that distance,
it's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll think like, oh man, I did this one with 6,000 feet of climbing.
Yeah.
And now like I'll do this flat one. What do I care? And it's still hard.
Yeah.
So I think anytime you're on your feet for, more than
5 hours.
3, 4, 5 hours. There's even half marathons I run where I'm like, gosh, this is hard. So I think if you push yourself, if it's not hard, you're maybe not doing it right. So I guess that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much, we covered everything I wanted to cover in this first episode of the post-race podcast with your hosts, David and Courtney.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. Did you have anything else to say?
I don't think so.
Next
I'm just
episode,
happy I finished.
Yeah.
Happy I finished my first ultra.
I'm very happy too. Next episode, we're going to talk about the Squamish 50/50, which would have been our first episode, but spoiler alert, it was a DNF, and I didn't want to start the show off with a DNF. So, but that'll be coming next. And so, yeah, that's
Thanks,
it.
guys.
Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.
See you later.